Hi folks. It's been quite a long time since I've talked about the subject of telekinesis or psychokinesis. Might have been a couple of years actually. Well anyway, the question has come up at the dark wheel, and the question is telekinesis real? And if so, what is the possible science behind it? So let's talk a little bit about that, because I've had some experience, as you know. And even though I haven't been talking about it in a long time, I have in no way recanted anything that I talked about in the past. Psychic phenomena are real, and some of us have had experience of them. They just happen to be very hard to replicate. Not just in a lab, but even for yourself, you know, sitting alone in your own house trying to make a parapsychological effect occur. But when they occur, when you get it, it's mind-blowing. So, what can I say with reasonable confidence in a scientific sense about the nature of psychokinesis? Well, I don't believe that it's miraculous or supernatural. If it were, I might be able to levitate something heavy off the ground. But I can't do that. Why? Presumably because of the gravitational pull of the earth. It's too heavy. Levitating this delicious banana and strawberry smoothie, see, I'm still eating healthy, levitating this off the ground and holding it there would require energy sufficient enough to hold it there, and a force applied to this that is equal to the force of gravity pulling it to the ground. Right? That's how the world works. So, to say that anything breaks conservation of energy laws, that's a bold claim. And my experience with anything of a psychic nature leads me to believe that these laws are not being broken by the simple fact that I'm only able to move something like a psi wheel, a very light piece of foil or paper pivoted on a single pinhead point of friction. It's hard. But when you get something definite to occur, like I said, it's mind-blowing. So, you can play with the psi wheel. It's not too difficult to get it to spin when you haven't covered it with a glass bowl. But even in those circumstances, it's very hard to be certain that you're getting anything real to occur, because the forces of heat from the hands, a draft of air blowing through the room, convection from a nearby object, sources of static nearby, all these things can come into play. But a glass bowl over the top of it, well, actually you can get static to go through a glass bowl, but you got to be careful about that one. But I've never been able to move it under a glass bowl using the heat from my hand. It just does not happen. And I know a lot of armchair skeptics, they watch my videos and they say, oh, it's just the heat from your hand. It's not. And you can set it up and try it. It doesn't move with the heat of your hand. It doesn't move if you set a radiator beside it and heat the glass up so much that you can hardly touch it with your finger. It still doesn't move the psi wheel. Right? I've tested all this stuff. I've documented it on video. It's all here on YouTube. So, when you get it to move under a glass bowl, that's a big deal. Especially if it's accompanied by unusual physiological sensations in your own body, which is what has happened. I had a very profound experience once where I was keeping my hand beside the bowl. And again, this is old hat to people who've been here for a long time and who've watched my channel. and I was willing it to move. I was actually imagining a kind of a blue force of some kind, and I'm just using a mental picture as a kind of a mechanism. There is no actual blue anything coming out of me, but I'm using that mental picture to try and cause something to happen. So I'm imagining this force coming out of my hand and penetrating the bowl and striking the side wheel, and nothing's happening, and I'm just, after a while doing this, I'm just getting kind of bored, so I just start daydreaming and not paying attention to anything. And after about a minute or so of daydreaming, I suddenly feel as if something has just gone, something has shot out of my hand. A little bit like the feeling of a subtle electric shock that you would get maybe off a car door when you touch it. Not as painful as that though, just the sensation that something shot up my arm and out of my hand. This arrested my attention. I looked back at the side wheel and it immediately started to rotate. Now, I understand skeptics of things like this. If you've never experienced it, of course you're going to be skeptical. And of course I don't expect you to just believe these words. You have to do this for yourself. That's what it takes. And because I've got something like this to happen so rarely, that's why I can't just go to a lab. I can't, head up to Belfast and talk to Queen's University and get involved. It's maybe there's some kind of studies could go on up there with some students or something. This is so rare that you can get something like that to happen. One other time, I tried for a full week to get something to happen, and I was every day, trying for maybe half an hour to an hour, and it failed every day. And then on the seventh day, God rested from all that He had made. Sorry, brain fart. On the seventh day, I was sitting in front of the coffee table. I was trying to do it with no hands, and I was documenting this on video, and it's on YouTube. When I was just sitting there with my hands at my sides, and I felt a vibration, a turbulence in my abdomen, which seems to be the seat of all this, seems to be the source. And right after I felt that turbulence, the side wheel started to spin underneath the glass bowl. No body part of mine was even any closer than maybe half a meter from it. That was profound. So in those instances, there is a direct correlation between something physiological happening in the body and something unusual happening outside the body. So there's where you've got to fit your science into the picture. I don't know what this energy is, but it does appear to be energy. It's not miraculous. Something is being charged up, seemingly, if I can put it that way perhaps, within the body and released from the body across space, and then it's affecting the other object. And again, I know this sounds like something from a superhero comic, but I definitely don't want to give that impression, because it's not like that. I get mail from people who seem to think that psychic abilities can be cultivated as abilities that are useful in some way. And from my experience, I just have to tell you that I don't think that's possible. I don't think that can happen. I was as obsessional as anybody about this in the beginning, practicing every day for about an hour maybe. And after a while, I just realized that I seemed to hit a ceiling of sorts with what I was able to do. Or at least I got the feeling that any progress I made would require an incredible, super, hyper obsessional level of devotion that I just wasn't prepared to make. It's kind of like, if I could give you an analogy, it's kind of like going to the gym and lifting maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 kilogram weights and getting stronger and stronger, and thinking to yourself, that if you just keep doing this, eventually you'll be able to lift the double-decker bus. Whereas you know that's just not possible. So with something like psychokinesis, we seem to be dealing with very small packets of energy that can accomplish very little. So in the same way that the muscles and the energy of the human body is not capable of physically lifting a double-decker bus, then whatever small packets of energy are available in the psychic sense, they're not capable of doing anything very useful. Is it possible to have a complete understanding of psychokinesis in a scientific respect? I have the feeling the answer to that is no. And I've been thinking about this because there's a wider question here that I want to broach. Is everything in the universe explainable scientifically? Think about that question for a minute. Rational people like me, and you, I hope, you almost tend to think, well, of course, yes, we're scientific people. Everything's explainable scientifically, because we think that the opposite to scientific is always irrational. So would we ever dare to say that the universe is irrational? No. But that's not what I'm getting at. We've certainly found a lot about the universe that can be explained scientifically. But take consciousness, whatever we mean by consciousness, this strange subjective experience that we all have. Can consciousness be reduced to an equation? Because that's really what's at the heart of this. If consciousness can be explained scientifically, then we're saying that consciousness is no more than a mathematical pattern, an equation, something that is predictable, because that's what science is about. Science is all about finding the patterns that allow us to make predictions. Is that what consciousness is? Because what we're really saying is that the universe and everything in it is just a machine. And that's very close to saying that you're an automaton, a robot, that consciousness is an illusion. It's just mathematical organization, just patterns that are totally predictable if you could just go deep enough and see what the patterns are. I don't believe that. I think the prevailing scientific paradigm that the universe is a big machine, I think that's wrong. And I think the best evidence for it is the mystery of consciousness. And it is a mystery. And again, we'd probably have to talk about free will and everything. What is free will? Do we have free will? You see, it's easy to think that the neurons do the firing and consciousness just behaves according to the neurons. But could it be that the neurons aren't guiding consciousness? The neurons are correlating to consciousness. It's kind of a goes with thing. Like when I make a certain decision, it's not because the neurons fired first, then I decided. It's that the deciding and the firing of the neurons are actually the same thing. But there's more to it than just seeing it as a deterministic state of affairs where everything is predictable if you could just see deep enough. I don't think I'm predictable. And the best evidence that consciousness is not just a machine, not just part of a big machine, is psychic phenomena. Because in the prevailing paradigm, a mind is located right here. Another person's mind is located right over there. And they are separated by a distance, and they do not meet. And they cannot see the contents of each other's heads. And yet, there are people who have inexplicable experiences of what you might call telepathy or ESP or possibly, I was going to say presentiment, but that's more like to do with the future. What I'm talking about are things like you have a sudden feeling of dread, an inexplicable feeling of dread comes over you that you don't know why, and then within a couple of minutes you get a phone call that tells you that one of your loved ones has been in a terrible car accident and is in a critical condition. Right? That's a psychic experience. Twins have been known to be particularly linked in that kind of a way, where one can feel what the other is feeling. That doesn't fit this view that it's all just a big machine. And if it's not a machine, then it's not fully explainable scientifically. It will be partially explainable scientifically, but never fully. And I'm okay with that, actually. I like the mystery. It returns me to the feeling I had when I was a kid. A feeling that I think was right about the universe. And yet it got eroded by both authoritarian religion, who basically told me that there was a big character, a sky god behind all this. And then it also got eroded by the sort of science that you learn in high school, which is just basic Newtonian mechanics, totally dualistic in nature, where, again, it's just all about we're all separate from each other. Truth is that we're not. Truth is that life is a big mystery, and it is magical. Not in that miraculous sense, but in the sense that you have as a kid. Wonderment. So I'm glad that it's possible to have these minor psychic experiences. I don't think they can be turned into abilities. I think all of the people who make careers out of psychic things are frauds, because if you can do it well enough to make a career out of it, then you should be able to claim that $1 million that James Randi offers. I could never claim it because I could never demonstrate anything potent enough to satisfy the sort of criteria he would want. But I content myself that the experiences that I've had are real. I don't have to have anything to prove to anybody except to try and encourage people to make the same personal discovery for themselves. And it may be something that happens to you completely accidentally, just like the phone call I described, although hopefully nothing quite so tragic as that. But the usefulness of it is not in the ability to turn it into a superpower of sorts. The usefulness of it is that it changes your entire outlook on your sense of self and your sense of the universe. You won't look at yourself as a tiny little speck of dust inhabiting this vast alien place. If anything, it gives you more a sense that you are intimately connected to all this. And I would like to add, although this is supposed to be about science, this video, I would like to add a little bit of philosophy into the mix, in that we know that the universe ultimately is one. To state it scientifically, we could say it's a unified field. Things are not separate from each other. It's all one. It's a unified field. So you don't really, at a fundamental level of being, you don't really get to say that you have a separate identity from the whole. But you have to go a little further than that and make that relevant to your life. That even though from a day-to-day perspective you still have to get out of bed and rub the sleep out of your eyes and put your trousers on one leg at a time and take care of your body, and it feels as if the edge of you is just where this meat sack meets the atmosphere around it, right? It feels that way because that's all that you have control over, with the immediate limbs at your disposal and the eyes that peer out of this thing. But there is no fundamental separation between your body and its environment. The air that enters your lungs is the same in principle as the blood that circulates through your veins. There's a total dependency of organism and environment that makes it all one. So in a sense, there's this little center of consciousness here that extends outward. The relationships between all these material substances, it all extends outward to the furthest reaches of the universe. It really does. I mean, there's no Earth without the sun. There's no sun without the other stars in the galaxy. It's all this big relationship, and it goes... there's no end to it. So, cultivate that sense of self. Now, why is that relevant to psychokinesis and ESP and that sort of a thing? Well, when you try to do something like that, you see the mind state that you have to get into for an effect to occur is a state of not thinking. A state where you forget yourself as an organism, where the borders between things dissolve somewhat. You do this by not thinking. This is the sort of thing that you'll hear Zen Buddhists talk about when they sit facing a wall and spend long periods in meditation. That's not separate from what we're talking about here. It could be called the meditative state. I've also heard it said that you want to put your brain into alpha rhythms. I'm not sure if I'm saying that exactly right, but I've heard it said that you want to get your brain going on alpha. But I think the fundamental reason why a psi effect can occur is because this meat sack isn't you. You're everything. It's just that consciousness is able to access the five senses very easily. But if you can quieten the mind to such a degree that you forget the five senses and you forget even brain-based thinking, then you seem to be able to extend your ability to act and extend your ability to perceive in ways that are not common. That seems to be as close to a method as I can really describe. And again, it has to be practiced. It can't really be explained very well. You have to sit and find that sort of thoughtless state for yourself. So, everything, you see, everything in the universe, or in terms of individual existence, everything can really be reduced to what you might call inward and outward directions from the self, whatever we mean by the self, right? We have outward actions that take place with our hands and feet and our body. We have inward perceptions that take place through the eyes, the ears, through taste, through touch, smell. Okay? So things go outward, things go inward. Well, psychokinesis and ESP are just extensions of those two same vectors, where you're able to act and perceive outward and inward in ways that are not easily accessible from normal states of consciousness. I think of the self here, the self, as a focusing of the universe into an organism that is basically waiting for the universe to be focused. I don't think of my mind as a thing that exists in here. I think of myself as the universe that is focused into this form. It's also focused into your form. There's no real separation between us. There's just the appearance of that at the level of the organism. But the only real self is the universe, is the whole. So, down at this level, if you can quieten things down, the universe then behaves in ways that are a little uncommon. That's what I think's going on. It's theoretical, and it is based on my personal philosophy as well. So I'm not just sticking strictly to the scientific facts as we find them, but I think it's probably the best working model of psi phenomena that I can come up with. I do recommend that you read Dean Radin's books. He's got 3 out: The Conscious Universe, Entangled Minds, and Supernormal. They're all well worth reading, and you'll learn a lot about psychic phenomena from them. And again, I do recommend that you try it for yourself.